March 10, 1943. Nadzab Airfield, New Guinea. The tropical air ripples above the red clay runway. Mechanics in sweat-stained khaki shove crates of .50 caliber ammunition toward a row of unfamiliar machines, bulky, wide-bodied fighters whose silver bellies gleam in the sun. To the Japanese scouts circling high over the Owen Stanley Range, they look absurdly heavy, like flying oil drums with wings. One pilot in a Nakajima Ki-43 radios back to Rabaul, laughing. New enemy plane, a flying brick. On the ground, Lieutenant Harold Tex Summers wipes grime from his faceplate and climbs the ladder into his P-47 Thunderbolt. Even his fellow Americans aren't convinced. It's nearly 5 tons of steel and fuel, twice the weight of the P-40s it replaces. Rumor has it the Republic engineers built it around its monstrous Pratt Whitney R-2800 double wasp engine first, then added wings as an afterthought. He flips the magneto switches. The engine coughs, then erupts, a deep metallic roar that swallows the jungle noise. Behind him, ground crewmen grin as palm fronds shiver in the blast of the propeller wash. Tex feels the vibration through his boots. He mutters, "Flying brick or not, let's see if it flies." At 2,000 horsepower, the Thunderbolt lunges down the dirt strip like a bison breaking free. The tail rises, the heavy frame shudders, and, with a guttural boom, the P-47 lifts off, banking toward the haze where Japanese fighters wait. 20 miles east, First Lieutenant Masao Ito of the 204th Sentai closes on the new intruder. Through his canopy, he sees a hulking American machine with thick wings and no grace. Slow, he thinks. His Ki-43 Oscar turns tight and dives. He fires a burst. The rounds spark off the Thunderbolt's armor like rain on tin. The American doesn't even flinch. Tex pulls hard on the stick. The brick climbs like a rocket, the supercharger screaming. At 15,000 feet, he rolls inverted, dives, and rakes Ito's plane with 8 .50 caliber guns that spit flame in unison. The Ki-43 explodes into a ball of flame, spiraling down into the valley. Back at Rabaul that night, Japanese briefing officers speak in hushed tones. The enemy's new fighter is fast in a dive. Too fast. One pilot adds, "They call it Thunderbolt. We call it the flying brick that kills." Tex lands hours later, the wing edges pocked with bullet holes, and radios in, "Brick's still in one piece, and so ain't theirs." Above the Pacific, mockery turns to unease. The Thunderbolt has arrived. April 1943, Farmingdale, New York. Thousands of miles away from the steaming jungles of New Guinea, another kind of thunder echoes across Long Island. The Republic Aviation Factory never sleeps. Sparks fly from acetylene torches, riveting guns hammer in rhythm, and the smell of hot oil fills the hangars. Over 20,000 workers, men and women, labor shoulder to shoulder under fluorescent lights, churning out the most powerful single-engine fighter ever built. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the brainchild of Alexander Kartveli, a Georgian immigrant who had fled war in Europe. His belief was radical. Survivability first. He didn't want a sleek, delicate fighter. He wanted a steel juggernaut that could dive like a meteor, soak up punishment, and bring its pilot home. When Republic's engineers unveiled the prototype in 1941, even U.S. Army Air Corps officers hesitated. It was big, heavy, and costlier than anything before. Some called it a flying tank, yet Kartveli's vision found its champion, Major General Henry Hap Arnold, who saw the R-2800 engine as the beating heart of American air power. "If we can build it," Arnold told Congress, "we can win with it." By 1943, the Jug, as pilots affectionately nicknamed it, rolled off assembly lines like an industrial symphony. Women in kerchiefs tested gun mounts, machinists fitted turbo superchargers, and test pilots rocketed over Long Island Sound, trailing smoke from brand-new engines that could push 430 miles per hour. One engineer, wiping sweat from his face, grinned at the roar overhead and said, "Let the Germans laugh. They won't when they hear this thing dive." May 1943, Duxford Airfield, England. Across the Atlantic, the 4th Fighter Group, veterans of the Eagle squadrons, stared skeptically at the first shipment of P-47s. Captain Don Blakesley spat his cigarette onto the tarmac. "She's built like a beer keg," he muttered. "Won't turn, won't climb, and by the time she's airborne, the war'll be over." But the ground crews loved it. Its rugged airframe meant fewer repairs, and its 8 Browning M2 machine guns, 4 in each wing, gave it more firepower than any single-engine fighter in the world. Within weeks, the 4th Group took their beer kegs into the skies over occupied France. They quickly discovered something extraordinary. The P-47 might be slow to climb, but once it got up there, it was unstoppable. At 30,000 feet, its turbo supercharger came alive. Luftwaffe pilots who dove from altitude expecting easy kills found themselves chased by a screaming Thunderbolt that could dive faster than anything in the sky. Even the feared Focke-Wulf 190. On May 15, 1943, Blakesley himself dove from 28,000 feet after a formation of FW-190s near Rouen. He pressed the throttle forward. The P-47 shook violently as the airspeed indicator climbed past 500 mm's. The Germans tried to roll away, but gravity and horsepower were on Blakesley's side. He opened fire at 400 yards, and his tracers ripped through one FW-190's tail. The Germans spiraled down, trailing smoke. "Not bad for a flying beer keg," Blakesley muttered into his oxygen mask. Back at Duxford, the men began painting Thunderbolts on their cowlings. The nickname Jug, short for Juggernaut, stuck. June 1943, Rabaul, New Britain. Japanese intelligence officers began reporting on the new American fighter appearing in both theaters, Europe and the Pacific. Their early assessments mocked it. Slow to turn, large target, unfit for dogfighting. But combat reports told a different story. Pilots described terrifying high-speed dives and gun passes that shredded convoys and airfields. In one raid over Buin, a formation of P-47s escorted B-25 Mitchells at high altitude. When Japanese Zeros tried to intercept, the Thunderbolts didn't dogfight. They used vertical tactics, diving, firing, and climbing back into the clouds. Each pass left another Zero burning. Lieutenant Masao Ito's surviving comrades gave the aircraft a new nickname, Raimi, Thunderclap, back in the States, August 1943. In newspapers from New York to Chicago, headlines began to appear. New Thunderbolt fighter stuns Axis pilots. But the real revolution was happening behind the headlines, in American factories. The Thunderbolt's complex turbo supercharger system required precision machining, high alloy steel, and advanced cooling ducts. What once took months of trial assembly was now streamlined by thousands of Rosie the Riveters and machinists, many of them working double shifts. At the Republic plant, engineers hung maps of Europe on the walls, marking every sortie flown by P-47s in red yarn. Each new engine built meant another mission. Each bullet loaded meant another pilot coming home. One inspector, a middle-aged woman from Brooklyn named Clara Holt, was known for her sharp eye and sharper tongue. "These bolts better hold," she'd bark at apprentices. "My boy's flying one over France." And they did hold. By late 1943, P-47 squadrons were tearing into German supply lines, strafing trains and airfields with impunity. In the Pacific, they were carving paths through jungles and mountains. providing air cover for infantry pushing across New Guinea. The flying brick had become the sledgehammer of Allied air power. Yet its story was only half told. For soon, the Thunderbolt would take on its most brutal challenge. Not in the skies of Europe or New Guinea, but in the furnace of the Pacific Islands, where heat, storms, and relentless enemy fire would test whether a machine built of steel could carry human courage any further. Tex Summers would find himself back in that cockpit, diving through flak toward an airfield on Bougainville, with the throttle wide open and tracer fire streaking past his wings. The Thunder was coming back to the Pacific, louder than ever. June 6, 1944, Normandy, France. Dawn breaks through the clouds like a wounded sun. Below the P-47 formations, the sea is alive, a moving city of ships, landing craft, and fire. The invasion has begun. The world's greatest armada pounds the French coast with artillery while thousands of soldiers brace to storm the beaches. Overhead, the Thunderbolts circle like hawks, their silver wings flashing in the early light. Lieutenant Harold Tex Summers, now a veteran of both Pacific jungles and European skies, scans the beach through his canopy. "My God," he mutters. From 10,000 feet, the sheer scale of D-Day is beyond belief. The ocean boiling with steel, the shore a storm of smoke and tracer fire. "Jug lead to all flights," comes Major Zemke's voice. "Priority targets, bunkers, bridges, and anything with a swastika. Make it thunder, boys." Tex eases the throttle forward. The jug vibrates, the R-2800's deep growl turning into a roar. 8 machine guns are armed, 1-800 rounds ready to tear apart the Atlantic wall. He dives toward Omaha Beach. The first strike. As the Thunderbolts sweep over the French coastline, the air is thick with smoke and flak. German gunners open up from cliffs and hedgerows, their shells bursting black among the clouds. 2 o'clock low, flak battery, shouts Captain Layton. Tex banks hard and lines up the target. His thumb presses the trigger, the Brownings thunder in rhythmic bursts. The German position vanishes in a cloud of dust and debris. He pulls up sharply, dodging tracer fire, wings creaking. From above, waves of thunderbolts scream down on coastal defenses, strafing everything that moves: trucks, gun pits, radio towers. Pilots fire rockets into bunkers, watching them erupt like volcanoes. The radio crackles with chaotic voices. "Hit that bridge north of Vierville." "Rail line destroyed. Repeat, destroyed." "Watch the flak, boys. They're throwing everything they've got." Tex's canopy is streaked with soot and blood, not his own. A burst from a nearby gunship has shredded the side of another P-47 in his formation. The pilot, Lieutenant Darby, spirals into the sea below. Tex grips the stick harder, jaw clenched. "We'll finish it, Darb," he mutters. German Command, Normandy, 0730 hours. At the Château de Bénouville, German Major Wilhelm Hanke watches the sky through binoculars. "Those heavy fighters, they come in waves," he shouts over the din of anti-aircraft fire. "We cannot hold if they keep this up." His adjutant, pale and shaking, nods. They dive faster than our Flak 88s can track. Moments later, a pair of Thunderbolts appear over the tree line, engines howling like beasts. Their guns rake across the courtyard. Trucks explode, radio lines snap, and the Major dives for cover as chunks of masonry rain down. When the smoke clears, the only thing left of his command car is a twisted frame burning in the grass. The Luftwaffe can't respond. Most of its remaining fighters are grounded by fuel shortages or bombed-out airfields. Over Normandy, the sky belongs to the Thunderbolt. Operation Cobra, July 1944. After the initial landings, Allied forces grind slowly through the Norman hedgerows. The Germans dig in behind stone walls and bocage, ambushing tanks at close range. Progress is measured in yards until the jug is unleashed again. Tex and his squadron are reassigned to fighter bomber duty, the new hammer of the Allied breakout. Their P-47s now carry 500-pound bombs under each wing and rockets along the belly. "Gentlemen," the operations officer says, pointing at a map covered in red circles, "your job is to erase those." They take off at dawn, engines growling under heavy loads. From 10,000 feet, the landscape below looks like a patchwork quilt of green fields. Peaceful, almost innocent. Then the bombing starts. Tex dives on a German column caught near St. Lo. Tanks scatter like ants, their turrets swiveling too late. He releases both bombs. They fall true. The explosion flips a Panther tank onto its side like a toy. "Direct hit," his wingman yells over the radio. "Copy that," Tex replies. "Let's give him the rest." He lines up again and unleashes his rockets. They streak down in blinding trails and slam into a farmhouse packed with enemy troops. The building disintegrates in a thunderclap. After the smoke clears, Tex circles the area. The road is littered with burning vehicles and fleeing soldiers. The Thunderbolt has become a flying artillery piece, the sky's answer to the German panzer divisions. Ground crews, the unsung heroes. Back at the forward airfield near Sainte-Mère-Église, mechanics and armorers labor around the clock. The heat from the engines burns their hands. The roar of takeoffs never stops. Corporal Annie Haskins, one of the few women in the maintenance crew, wipes sweat from her brow as she reloads the belts of 50 caliber rounds. "They'll be back in 30 minutes, she says, "and I'll be damned if they go up half-loaded." Every bullet, every bomb, every drop of fuel is a race against time. By sunset, most ground crews have worked 18 hours straight. They sleep beneath wings, wrenches still in hand, as the next shift rolls in. The sound of victory. By the end of July 1944, the German 7th Army is collapsing. The Thunderbolts fly up to 4 sorties a day, cutting supply lines, torching convoys, and silencing every gun that dares fire at Allied troops. In a letter home, Tex writes, "Mom, they used to call her the Flying Brick. Now, even the enemy calls her the sound of death. You can feel it in your chest before you ever see her. That's how you know you're winning." His words ring true. The roar of the Thunderbolt becomes the anthem of Allied ground troops. Soldiers cheer whenever they hear its rumble overhead. The Luftwaffe tries to retaliate, but their aces are gone, their fuel nearly dry. P-47s now dive-bomb airfields deep inside Germany, turning runways into smoking craters. August 1944, the liberation of Paris. As the Allies push east, the Jug keeps watch. When the French resistance rises in Paris, Thunderbolts patrol the skies above the city, ensuring no German reinforcements reach the capital. On August 25, 1944, as tanks roll through the streets of a free Paris, Tex and his squadron fly overhead. From the cockpit, he can see the Eiffel Tower glinting in the morning light, no longer under Nazi control. He smiles, voice low in the radio. From New Guinea to Normandy, the brick finally flew. But the war isn't over yet. Across the Channel, Allied strategists are already looking east toward the heart of Germany. And across the Pacific, the last and bloodiest chapter awaits. The P-47 Thunderbolt, now a legend, will soon meet its deadliest tests yet, against the rising sun itself. September 11th, 1944. Over the Rhine Valley, the sky above western Germany is a battlefield painted in contrails. Beneath the wings of the 56th Fighter Group, the landscape glows with the fires of retreating Wehrmacht columns. Rivers shimmer like molten glass, towns smolder, and bridges crumble under the relentless rain of bombs. Lieutenant Harold Tex Summers presses his oxygen mask tight, the roar of his Pratt Whitney R-2800 vibrating through his bones. His squadron, 12 P-47 Thunderbolts, has just crossed the Rhine on a rhubarb mission. Low-level attack against supply trains, tanks, and anything that moves. Jug lead to all birds. Tex radios, his voice crackling through static. Stay under the cloud deck. Keep your eyes open. We're hunting iron. From the north, the wind carries the smell of cordite and burning oil. German armor columns retreating from the Falaise pocket snake along the roads below. Dark lines of smoke and steel. Tex pushes the throttle forward. The jug trembles, then surges ahead. Time to pay the piper, he mutters, and dives. Low-level hell. At 400 mph and less than 300 feet off the deck, the Thunderbolts descend like metal hawks. Tex's gun sights lock onto a Panzer IV column trying to cross a narrow bridge. He squeezes the trigger. 8 .50 caliber guns open up in unison. The tracers tear across the road, ripping through tank hatches and trucks. The first Panzer explodes, throwing its turret 50 feet into the air. Tex banks left, releases a pair of 500-pound bombs. The bridge vanishes in a thunderous plume of fire and debris. "Bridge down," he yells. "Targets destroyed." Flak guns open up immediately. Black puffs of smoke surround the jugs as they pull away, shrapnel rattling against their fuselages like hail on tin roofs. One Thunderbolt takes a direct hit. Its right wing shears off, spiraling into a field. "Jug 6 is gone," shouts Layton. Tex doesn't look back. There's no time. Another convoy is forming up along the next road. "Let's make it count, boys," he growls, diving again. They strafe the convoy, setting fuel trucks ablaze. The explosions roll across the valley in chain reactions, each detonation echoing like a thunderclap. From the ground, terrified German soldiers scatter into ditches, cursing Donnerflugzeuge. Thunder planes. By noon, the 56th has destroyed 12 tanks, 3 locomotives, and countless vehicles. Only half the squadron returns unscathed. The ground war's best friend. To the soldiers on the ground, the sound of the P-47's engine becomes a promise. Salvation from the sky. Infantrymen on the front lines learn to cheer when they hear the low, guttural growl of the R-2800 approaching. Near Aachen, an American tank battalion radios desperately for air cover as a German counterattack pushes through the woods. Minutes later, the trees erupt with thunder. P-47s dive in pairs, rockets streaking into panzer formations. Jesus, they're tearing them apart. One tank commander shouts over the radio. When the dust settles, more than 30 German vehicles lie destroyed. General Omar Bradley would later call the Thunderbolt the most effective close support aircraft of the war. German perspective. The fear of the jug. In German forward command posts, officers now plan movements only at night. Daylight means death from above. At a field HQ near Koblenz, a Wehrmacht lieutenant scribbles in his diary, "We fear no infantry and few tanks. But these Thunderbolts, they are demons. They appear suddenly, strike without warning, and vanish into the sun. We shoot, but the bullets bounce off their hide." Even Luftwaffe ace Günter Rahl admits in a post-war interview, the P-47 was not elegant, but it was indestructible. You could hit it, and it would still come for you. Operation Market Garden. September 17, 1944. Tex's unit is reassigned north to support the daring Allied push into Holland. The airborne operation aimed at capturing bridges over the Rhine. At first light, hundreds of gliders and paratrooper transports fill the sky. Thunderbolts race ahead, strafing German positions near Eindhoven and Arnhem. Tex banks left over the Maas River, spotting muzzle flashes below. Flak positions, 3 o'clock low. He dives again. Tracers cut through the haze as his guns bark thunder. The flak battery explodes in a burst of orange flame. He pulls up so low that his propeller tips slice through tree branches. "Nice work, lead." Layton radios. "You just saved a lot of paratroopers down there." For the next 7 days, the Jugs fly constant sorties, covering the sky for the surrounded airborne divisions. When the ground offensive stalls, the Thunderbolts strike the bridges to delay German reinforcements. The price is heavy. Dozens of P-47s don't return. But their sacrifice keeps Allied hopes alive long enough to withdraw thousands of trapped men. The myth becomes machine. By late 1944, the P-47 is everywhere. Over France, Belgium, Italy, and the Pacific. Its legend spreads across every front. Cartoonists in stars and stripes draw the flying brick as a grinning metal monster chewing through Nazi tanks. Mechanics nickname it the Juggernaut of Justice. Tex's plane now bears 33 mission marks under the canopy, each a lightning bolt painted by his crew chief, Corporal Annie Haskins. "One for every time she's come back in one piece," she says proudly. Winter, the Ardennes offensive. As the snow begins to fall in December 1944, the war shifts again. The Germans launch their final desperate counterattack, the Battle of the Bulge. American troops are surrounded, fighting in freezing forests under constant artillery fire. Once again, it's the Thunderbolt that breaks the siege. When the weather clears, they descend on the German armored spearheads with fury. Tex's squadron flies 12 missions in 3 days, destroying dozens of tanks and fuel depots. The Jug's heavy frame shrugs off small arms fire, its engines howling in the thin, icy air. By Christmas, the German offensive collapses. As one captured German officer confesses during interrogation, "Your Thunderbolts, they ruled the sky. Wherever we moved, thunder followed." By 1945, the flying brick that once drew laughter now commands fear and respect across 2 oceans. From the skies of France to the frozen forests of the Ardennes, it becomes the war's iron storm, a machine that turned mockery into mastery. But Texas war isn't finished. Orders have come down from command. The 56th will soon redeploy east. The target, the heart of Germany itself. Berlin awaits, and the thunder has one last roar to unleash. March 1945. Central Germany, near Kassel. Snow still clings to the blackened rooftops below. But spring has already come to the sky. The Thunderbolts fly in tight formation, sunlight glinting off their silver wings. Below them, the Reich burns. Factories gutted, railways twisted, bridges collapsed. Once proud cities now lie in ruins beneath the constant hum of Allied air power. Lieutenant Harold Tex Summers adjusts his oxygen mask, his voice low over the radio. "All right, boys, this is it. No more edges of the map. We're in Germany now." The mission is simple and brutal. Destroy the rail junction at Kassel, one of the last arteries feeding fuel and munitions to the collapsing Wehrmacht. "Jug lead to all flights," Tex radios. "Arm your bombs. We go in hot." The formation banks toward the target, and the horizon erupts in black flak into the wall of fire. German 88mm guns open up from camouflaged positions, filling the air with bursting shells. The sky becomes a storm of smoke and steel. Tracers slice upward like red lightning. Tex feels the Thunderbolt shake violently as fragments tear into his left wing. Warning lights flash, his fuel gauge flickers, then steadies. "Still flying," he mutters, forcing the stick forward. Below, the target appears. Long rows of freight cars, loaded with tanks, ammunition, and trucks. "There's our dinner," says Leighton, his voice calm but strained. "Roger that," Tex replies. "Let's feed him thunder." He dives. The ground rushes up, the altimeter spinning. Bomb bay doors open. 2 500-pound bombs drop away. A moment of eerie silence. Then the world explodes. The rail yard vanishes in a wall of flame. Direct hit, tracks gone. But flak bursts again. One shell detonates directly beneath Leighton's jug. The aircraft vanishes in a ball of fire. "Blue 4's gone," someone yells. Tex bites down hard, rage surging through his chest. He banks low, lining up on the flak battery that fired the shot. "You bastards." 8 Brownings thunder. The German gun emplacement disintegrates in a wave of dust and smoke. When Tex pulls up, his canopy is blackened with soot, his oxygen hose half severed, yet the jug still climbs, defiant. By the time they cross back into Allied territory, 4 Thunderbolts are missing. But the Kassel Junction is gone, erased from the map. The death of the Luftwaffe. Days later, intelligence reports confirm it. The Luftwaffe is finished. Their once dominant air force has less than 300 operational fighters left, and most are grounded by fuel starvation. When P-47s patrol over Western Germany now, there are no interceptors waiting, only scattered flak and smoke rising from burning towns. Tex flies one of those patrols, the world below reduced to ash and surrender. "Hard to believe," he says quietly. "We used to be the underdogs." His wingman, Captain Dwyer, replies, "Every empire ends the same way, Tex, in silence and thunder." Grounded Fury. April 1945, the Elbe River. The jug's role shifts once more. From hunter of planes to destroyer of armies. As Allied ground forces close in on Berlin, Thunderbolts sweep ahead, annihilating what remains of German resistance. Outside Magdeburg, Tex's squadron spots a retreating column. Trucks, half-tracks, and horse-drawn wagons. Refugees mix with soldiers, a desperate exodus under gray skies. Command confirms, it's Wehrmacht armor in retreat. You are cleared hot. Tex hesitates. Through his canopy, he sees figures running, some in uniform, some not. He exhales. Copy that. His guns blaze. The tracers tear across the road, hitting fuel trucks and ammunition wagons. The blast rolls through the valley like an earthquake. Fire consumes everything. For a brief moment, he feels nothing. Then the guilt hits, fast and heavy. Leighton's empty seat flashes in his mind. The voices of the lost. Dwyer radios in. "Targets neutralized. Nice work, Tex." Tex doesn't answer. The sky falls silent. By mid-April, there's nothing left to fight in the air. P-47 pilots now spend more time escorting surrendered convoys than engaging enemies. One afternoon, Tex lands at a captured German airfield near Hanover. The runway is littered with wrecked Messerschmitts and Heinkels. He climbs from his cockpit, stretches, and stares at the silent machines. A young Luftwaffe mechanic, hands raised, steps from behind a hangar. He's no older than 19. His uniform is torn, his face smudged with oil. "You flew them?" Tex asks, pointing at a burned-out FW-190. The boy nods. "Once." Tex studies him for a long moment. "Hell of a plane," he says softly. The German nods again. "Yours better," he replies in broken English. "Too strong, too fast." They share a moment of quiet as the wind carries the smell of oil and surrender. Berlin burns. By late April, the sky over Berlin glows red even at midnight. From the outskirts, Thunderbolts orbit above the inferno, observing the final collapse. Artillery flashes light up the city like lightning strikes. Tex's voice crackles over the radio. "This is it, boys. The last thunder." They dive one final time, strafing the outskirts where remnants of the Wehrmacht resist. Tanks burn, anti-aircraft guns fall silent. When the squadron returns to base, Tex parks his P-47, little bastard Danefouise, and sits in the cockpit for a long time, listening to the ticking metal as the engine cools. The war in Europe is over. He looks up at the sky, pale, calm, silent. "She made it," he whispers, patting the worn metal dashboard. "And so did I." Homecoming, May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. All across England, church bells ring. At Boxted Airfield, the 56th Fighter Group gathers around their Thunderbolts one last time. Men laugh, cry, drink, and stare at the machines that carried them through hell. Major Zemka gives a short speech. They called it ugly. They said it couldn't fly. But this beast gave us the skies and our lives. Tex stands beside his crew chief, Annie Haskins, who wipes her greasy hands on her overalls. "Guess you won't need me to patch her up anymore," she says. Tex smiles faintly. "She'll need patching as long as men keep breaking things." They laugh, but the laughter fades into the sound of silence. A peace they've forgotten how to feel. The P-47 Thunderbolt, once mocked as a flying brick, now stands as a symbol of relentless endurance. A machine that outlasted every insult, every flak burst, every storm. Its thunder silenced the Reich. But halfway across the world, another sun still rises. And in the Pacific, a new storm brews. For Tex and the Jug, the war isn't done yet. Japan awaits, and the thunder will fly once more. July 1945, Ishima Airfield, Okinawa. The air reeks of gasoline and salt. Typhoon winds from the east twist through the palm trees, carrying the stench of burned coral and diesel. Rows of P-47 Thunderbolts line the edge of the runway. Their olive-drab paint faded by sun and salt air, their noses decorated with shark teeth, pin-up girls, and lightning bolts. The flying bricks have come back to the Pacific, where the war began and where it will soon end. Lieutenant Harold Tex Summers climbs the ladder into Little Bastard Dis 2 for the first time since Europe. The metal is hot enough to burn his palms. He slides into the seat, looks out toward the sea, and exhales slowly. "Feels like coming home to hell," he mutters. Captain Ray Dwyer, now his squadron leader, leans against the wing, cigarette in hand. "Welcome back to the humidity, Tex," he says. "We missed your bad jokes." Tex grins faintly, tightening his harness. "And I miss sweating through my flight suit before takeoff." Dwyer's smile fades as he hands over a folded mission briefing. "We're striking Kyushu, fuel depots, rail lines, and airfields. They say Japan's almost done, but it doesn't look that way from up there." Tex scans the paper. Grid coordinates, flak concentrations, estimated enemy aircraft. Minimal. He knows better. The Japanese are never minimal. Into the storm, the Thunderbolts take off just before dawn, engines thundering like a squadron of gods. From the ground, the noise shakes tents and coffee cups alike. As they climb into the humid morning sky, the world below becomes a dark green ocean of jungle and sea. "To Jug lead to formation," Dwyer radios. "Maintain altitude, 10,000 feet. Remember, this isn't Europe. They'll come at you from the sun and vanish into clouds. Eyes sharp." Tex replies, "Copy that lead. Thunder ready." An hour later, the coast of Kyushu appears. Mist-covered cliffs and rice paddies glinting under the rising sun. The silence is broken by the first bursts of anti-aircraft fire. "Flak, 2 o'clock, someone shouts. Black clouds bloom around them. Tex banks sharply, feeling the turbulence rock his wings. They're awake down there. "Targets ahead, rail yards," Dwyer calls out. "Let's light 'em up." Tex rolls inverted, nose down, and dives through the smoke. His 8 Brownings erupt in flame, the recoil shaking his arms. Tracers rake across locomotives and freight cars, sparks igniting fuel drums in a chain of fire. Then, a flash of silver. Out of the sun, a formation of Japanese Kai-84. Hayate fighters dives toward them. "Bandits high!" Tex jerks his stick left, pulling into a hard climb. The Hayats are fast, faster than Zeros, almost as quick as the Jug in a dive. One lines up behind him, cannons spitting red fire. Tracers scream past his canopy. "Tex, break right." Dwyer's voice cuts through the radio. Tex rolls hard, feeling the G-force crush his ribs. The Hayate overshoots. Tex flips the Jug upside down, drops altitude, then pulls up behind the enemy. "Your turn." he growls, squeezing the trigger. The 50-caliber guns roar. The Japanese fighter disintegrates in midair, pieces of its fuselage fluttering like paper in the wind. Tex exhales through gritted teeth. "That's for Leighton," he whispers. The relentless grind. For the next 2 weeks, the squadron flies 3, sometimes 4 sorties a day. The missions blur together. Trains, bridges, airfields, ships. The Japanese fight with desperation. Kamikaze attacks strike Allied fleets daily. Smoke from burning oil tanks drifts across the sea like storm clouds. At night, Tex writes in his logbook by lantern light, "We used to fight for control of the sky. Now we fight for control of the ground." They're running out of planes, but not courage. He's seen the wreckage of Zeros, the broken wings of kamikazes who never made it to their targets. And yet, each morning, more come. One evening, while refueling on Ayashima, Tex walks the line of jugs with his crew chief, Sergeant Owen Briggs, a burly mechanic with grease permanently embedded in his skin. Briggs kicks one of the tires. She's taken holes, patched with tin, and still flies like she's new. Tex nods. She's not pretty. Briggs grins. Neither's war, but both get the job done. Operation 10 Go. April 1945, retold from mission logs. The Jug squadrons are ordered to intercept remnants of the Japanese fleet, including the giant battleship Yamato, steaming south in a suicide mission toward Okinawa. When Tex's formation arrives, the sea below is chaos. Dozens of U.S. carrier planes already swarm the target. Flak rises from the Yamato like a forest of fire. "Stay high and strike stragglers," Dwyer orders. Tex spots an escorting destroyer trying to escape. He dives at full throttle, rockets armed. The first salvo hits midship, an explosion tears through the deck. The second barrage ignites the engine room. Moments later, a shockwave ripples across the horizon. The Yamato detonates, split in half by torpedo and bomb strikes. The ocean itself seems to rise. Tex steadies his jug through the turbulence, eyes wide. "Jesus." "End of the Imperial Navy," Dwyer says quietly, and not a moment too soon. The waiting game. August 1945. By summer, the airfields of Okinawa are silent more often than not. There's little left to bomb. The radio hums with rumors. A new weapon. Tokyo bombed. War ending soon. Tex sits in his tent, shirtless, staring at the horizon. The Pacific wind carries the smell of rain. That evening, an orderly bursts in with a telegram from command. Hostilities suspended. Japan surrenders, effective immediately. For a long time, nobody says a word. The camp falls silent, broken only by the sound of waves and distant engines winding down for the last time. Dwyer finally mutters, "Guess that's it, Tex." Tex stands slowly, looking toward the flight line. The jugs sit motionless under the orange sunset. Dented, patched, beautiful in their ugliness. He removes his cap, resting it on the wing of little bastard II. "You did it, old girl," he whispers. "From New Guinea to Berlin to Japan. You made the whole damn world, Thunder." August 15, 1945. Victory over Japan Day. All across the Pacific, fireworks, gunfire, and cheers echo across islands. Marines dance, sailors weep, and pilots stare at the sky they no longer have to fight for. As night falls, Tex walks to the airstrip one last time. He looks up. No tracers, no flak, no engines. Just silence. He turns to Dwyer. "You ever think about how it all started?" Dwyer nods. "Yeah." They laughed at her. Tex smiles, and she laughed last. The two men walk away, leaving their thunderbolts gleaming under the stars. Silent sentinels of a war that had shaken the earth. The flying brick that once drew laughter had become thunder itself. A machine that carried men through the fire and brought them home. But for Harold Tex Summers, the roar of the R-2800 will never truly fade. In every storm, every distant rumble, he'll still hear it. The sound of the jug that refused to die. September 1945, Yaeshima, Okinawa. The airfield that once shook with thunder is quiet now. Rows of P-47 Thunderbolts sit idle under the Pacific sun, their engines cold, their propellers still. A few mechanics move among them, oiling parts out of habit, though everyone knows the war is over. The great storm has passed. But for men like Lieutenant Harold Tex Summers, it hasn't ended inside. He wakes each morning to the silence and doesn't trust it. His hand twitches for a throttle that isn't there, his ears straining for a roar that no longer comes. In the mess hall, the pilots talk about going home, farms, schools, jobs, wives they haven't seen in years. But no one speaks of what they'll do without the sky. Tex sits at the edge of the airstrip one evening, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. The horizon burns orange, and the empty silhouettes of thunderbolts stretch across the tarmac. Dwyer walks up behind him, coffee in hand. Hard to imagine it's over, Dwyer says. Tex doesn't answer. He looks toward little bastard Desetu, her paint faded and chipped, wings pitted by shrapnel scars. She looks tired, he finally says. So do you. They both laugh quietly. The kind of laugh that doesn't reach the eyes. The decommissioning. By October, the U.S. Army Air Forces begin pulling squadrons off the islands. The P-47s, once the beating heart of the air war, are now being replaced by sleeker P-51 Mustangs and the first experimental jets. Crates of spare engines, propellers, and ammunition are stacked for shipment or scrapping. One humid afternoon, Tex watches as ground crews paint over the squadron insignias. He feels something twist in his chest. When the men move toward his plane, he steps forward. Not her, he says quietly. The sergeant in charge looks at him. Orders, sir. Everything gets processed. Tex places a hand on the fuselage. You'll have to paint around her. The sergeant hesitates, then shrugs. Yes, sir. That night. Tex sits on the wing of little bastard Desetu, tracing the lightning bolt painted beneath the canopy. He remembers the roar of the R-2800 at full throttle, the vibration that rattled his teeth, the weight of the stick in his hand. In that machine, he'd lived 100 lives. From the jungles of New Guinea to the snows of Germany, he whispers to the metal beneath him. You did everything they said you couldn't. Homecoming, November 1945. Lubbock, Texas. When Tex steps off the train, the station smells of dust and wheat instead of oil and gunpowder. His mother meets him on the platform, tears shining in her eyes. You came home, she says, as if she never truly believed he would. He hugs her tight. Behind her, the wide plains stretch endlessly, the kind of open space that almost feels like sky. But it's quiet here, too quiet. At night, he dreams of engines, of dives through black flak clouds, of the vibration of bullets hitting metal. He wakes drenched in sweat, the Texas summer heat pressing down like the cockpit canopy of some invisible plane. One afternoon, he visits the local airfield, a small strip outside town. A few surplus trainers sit baking in the sun. The owner, an old barnstormer named Hank Wilkes, recognizes him. You're the kid who flew those big Thunderbolts, aren't you? Hank says. Tex nods. Hank gestures to a weathered Stearman biplane. She ain't no warbird, but she'll get you back in the air if you want. Tex runs his hand over the old wooden propeller. I think I've had enough flying to last a lifetime, he says. But that night, he dreams again of thunder. The ghosts of war, the following months blur into one another. Veterans flood home by the millions, tank crews, sailors, infantrymen, pilots, each carrying invisible scars. Some talk, most don't. Tex finds work as a mechanic in a small aviation workshop. Every so often, a farmer comes in with a sputtering engine or a bent propeller. Tex fixes them quietly, methodically, his hand steady, but his mind far away, still over the Rhine, or Rabaul, or Normandy. One day, a fellow veteran named Jack Blakesley, a former Mustang pilot, stops by. They share a beer in the hangar as rain drums on the roof. Hell of a machine, that Jug, Jack says. We used to see you boys come down from the stratosphere like meteors. Scared the hell out of everyone, including us. Tex chuckles. She wasn't elegant, but she'd take anything you threw at her. Jack nods. Most of them are getting melted down now. Steel for tractors, canning machines. Kinda feels wrong. Tex looks down. Maybe that's the point. Turn thunder into something that grows again. The museum that never slept. 1952, Dayton, Ohio. 7 years later, Tex visits the new U.S. Air Force Museum. Inside a vast hangar stands a restored P-47D gleaming beneath overhead lights. The plaque reads, Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, 1942-1945. The most produced American fighter aircraft of W.B. Over 15,600 built. Tex walks slowly around the plane. Everything about it is familiar. The broad wings, the blunt nose, the heavy landing gear. But this one looks too perfect. No burn marks, no chipped paint, no smell of oil or fear. A young boy in a baseball cap tugs his father's sleeve. Dad, why is it so fat? His father smiles. They called it the flying brick, but it won the war. Tex hides a smile. He leans close to the wing and whispers, They still don't understand you, old girl. That's okay. You don't need them to. He stands for a long moment, lost in the hum of distant memories. The sound of an R-2800 roaring to life, the vibration in his chest, the endless climb toward a sky full of fire. Legacy of thunder. Decades pass. The world moves on, from propellers to jets, from wars of nations to wars of memory. Yet wherever historians speak of endurance, of sheer engineering audacity, the Thunderbolt's name returns. They remember how it dove faster than any fighter alive, how it could absorb punishment no other plane could survive, and how its pilots, from Europe to the Pacific, swore it had a soul. In veterans' reunions, the men who flew her still call her the Jug. They toast to her in fading bars, their voices hoarse but proud. Some laugh, some cry, all remembering the same deep growl that once meant life. And somewhere, in a museum hangar or a forgotten field, the ghosts of those engines still whisper when the wind blows just right. Low, rolling, eternal, because the Jug never truly stopped flying. It lives in every storm, in every flash of lightning that rips across the night sky. The sound that follows, deep, rolling, defiant, is its echo. The thunder of men who once climbed into a machine they were told could never fly, and proved the world wrong. July 4th, 1976. Oshkosh, Wisconsin. The crowd stands shoulder to shoulder along the airstrip, hats pressed to chests as the American flag ripples in the summer wind. Engines rumble across the field. Mustangs, Corsairs, Hellcats, all relics of another age. Then, from the far end of the runway, a deeper sound rises. A growl so familiar that the old pilots in the crowd straighten instinctively. The announcer's voice booms over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, restored to flight for the first time in 20 years. A silver shape rolls into view, sunlight glinting off its thick fuselage. The propeller spins faster and faster until it becomes a blur. The growl turns to a roar. The Jug charges forward, heavy but unstoppable, tail rising as the air catches its broad wings. It lifts off, climbs, banks, and the sky trembles again with thunder. In the crowd, an elderly man in a weathered bomber jacket lowers his sunglasses. The name stitched above the patch reads H. Summers. Tex, he hasn't flown in 30 years. But as the jug arcs overhead, he feels every vibration in his chest. The smell of burnt oil, the recoil of 8 Brownings, the heat of the engine through the floorboards. He can almost hear the radio chatter, the voices of men long gone. Jug lead, targets ahead. His eyes glisten. She's still flying, he whispers. Beside him, a young boy, his grandson, tugs at his sleeve. Grandpa, that's your plane, isn't it? Tex smiles softly. Ours, kid. She belonged to all of us. The pilot's reunion. Later that afternoon, Tex finds himself in a hangar surrounded by living ghosts. A dozen surviving Thunderbolt pilots. Most in their 60s or 70s now. Their hair is white. Their hands tremble when they lift their coffee cups. But their eyes still carry the sharpness of men who once lived between life and death at 400 miles an hour. Didn't think we'd see her fly again, says Captain Ray Dwyer, still upright and proud despite his cane. Tex chuckles. She outlived us all, just like we said she would. They laugh, and for a moment, the years peel away. They talk about Europe, about Rabaul, about Normandy, about friends who never made it home. Each story begins the same way. Remember that time when the hangar doors open, the evening light pours in, and the P-47 gleams like molten silver. Someone starts humming Sentimental Journey. Others join in. The melody trembles through the air like the echo of an engine idling before takeoff. A visit to the past. That night, Tex walks alone through the aircraft display. Rows of machines from a world on fire. Spitfires, Messerschmitts, Mustangs, all frozen in time. Then he stops before the Thunderbolt again. This one isn't his little bastard del Teco, but the lines, the scars, the shape, all the same. The placard beside it reads, "I dedicated to all who flew and fell. They turned ridicule into reverence and metal into thunder." He rests a hand on the cold aluminum skin. In his mind, he's 22 again. The canopy rattling in the slipstream, flak bursting like black flowers outside, sweat and cordite stinging his eyes. He remembers Normandy, the Rhine, the endless climbs through fire and fear. He hears Leighton's voice over the radio. Not bad for a flying beer keg. He hears Dwyer laughing. He hears the roar of the R-2800. And beneath it all, he hears the heartbeat of the jug, enduring steel. In the years that follow, Tex dedicates his time to preserving warbirds and teaching aviation history to young cadets. He never romanticizes the war, never speaks of glory. He speaks of endurance. The jug wasn't fast like the Mustang, he tells them. Wasn't graceful like a Spitfire. But she could take a hit, bring you home, and still be ready the next morning. That's what won the war, not beauty, not brilliance, but grit. He teaches them how every rivet on the Thunderbolt was placed by hands in factories across America. Women, immigrants, kids fresh out of school, all hammering steel for a war they'd never see. This plane, he says, tapping a photo of the jug, is what happens when an entire country refuses to quit. The final flight, April 1979, Arizona desert. Tex stands on the tarmac beside one of the few airworthy Thunderbolts left in the world. He's been invited for a short commemorative flight, a symbolic send-off for the men who flew them. The pilot, a young Air Force captain, opens the rear seat canopy. "You sure you're up for it, sir?" Tex grins. "Son, I was born up for it." They take off just before dusk. The desert turns gold beneath the wings. As they climb, Tex grips the canopy frame, feeling the vibration deep in his chest. At 10,000 feet, the pilot hands him the controls. "She's all yours?" Tex hesitates, then wraps his hands around the stick. Firm, steady, familiar. He banks left, levels out, and opens the throttle. The jug surges forward, her deep growl swelling into a roar that shakes the horizon. The world blurs into orange and silver. For a fleeting moment, time folds. The sky is alive again with war and memory. He sees the flashes of flak, the shapes of his friends in formation, the great arch of smoke over Europe. Then it's gone. Just the wind, the sunset, and the rumble of an engine older than most of the men flying today. Tex laughs, a deep, unrestrained laugh, as tears stream down his cheeks. Still got it, old girl. Epilogue. In 1985, Tex Summers passes away quietly in his sleep at age 64. On his dresser sits a framed photograph, him standing beside little bastard de Sekou on a muddy airstrip in New Guinea, 1943. In the background, mechanics wave, and someone's scrawled across the bottom in pencil, "She's ugly, but she flies." But she... At his funeral, a lone P-47 performs a flyover. The sound of its engine rolls across the sky like distant thunder. Veterans look up, eyes misting. Civilians pause, unsure why their hearts ache at that sound. Because even decades later, the thunder still speaks. It speaks of a machine born of skepticism and forged in sacrifice. Of men who climbed into it with nothing but courage. Of a war that tested every limit of what humans and steel could endure. And above all, it speaks of the irony that defined its story. A plane once mocked as a flying brick became the hammer of victory, the storm that silenced empires, and the guardian that brought countless pilots home. When the sound fades, the sky is calm again. But the echo lingers, a whisper of engines, a memory of thunder, a promise that even the heaviest things can soar.